Lesson 80 is really amazing. It's awesome, really, when you look at it. Let me recognize my problems have been solved. No, they're going to be solved, or they will be solved, but they are solved. So if you're willing to recognize your problems, you recognize that you have no problems. Your one central problem has been answered and you have no other. Therefore, you must be at peace. Salvation thus depends on recognizing this one problem and understanding it's been solved. Whatever the experience is, that's the case. On the assumption you're not a day one student, but you're actually a teacher of God or an advanced teacher of God, you surely have reached the point where you accept, if not completely realize, but certainly accept that there is no separation from God. Okay, that is at the beginning, the first step into actually acknowledging what it is that you are, and more importantly, how to be in that. So we seem to have, in spite of that, some kind of grievance, that my grievances seem to be keeping me in hell. And why is that if I'm not separate from God? Because clearly, the idea that I'm separate from God comes from the grievance, doesn't it? It's not the other way around. I'm not grieving because I'm separate from God. I'm actually imagining that I'm separate from God because I'm in agreement. So the only question is why am I grieving? What am I grieving for? And what's the problem? Okay. On the understanding that there really isn't a problem in essence. The essential problem has been solved because of the recognition of what I am. Okay, so it's really an identity question, not an identity problem, because there isn't a problem there. Well, we've already agreed on that, but it's a question. And the question is, what am I being now that I understand that I'm not separate from God? Let's just look at that for a moment. Let's just confirm that what that means, that we are not separate from God. I have a glass tumbler here, glass tumbler of water. Forget the water. There are really just two elements here. There's the glass, and then there's the tumbler. Now, the tumbler is the form that the glass is taking. So the glass is the substance of that form. You could say that the glass is the creation, and the glass is the creator, and the form, the tumbler is the creation. Now the question is really, is it possible to actually separate the glass from the tumbler? Well, the answer must be, obviously, it cannot happen. You can't separate the two, nor can you separate any substance from its form without there being a replacement for that form to another form. But you can't have a form without a substance. That's what I'm saying. So this form, this what he's speaking now, this physical form, this mental form, this emotional form, intuitional, volitional form, as a substance, clearly, that animates it. And that substance is life. Now, life is God. You can't separate life from God. God is life, and life is God. So therefore, this form is the form of a substance which is God. How could there be a separation between the two? Impossible. So it's the acceptance of that that's important. The realization goes deeper, but the acceptance of that is really the acceptance of the principle from which then you express what it is that you're identified with. Now you have a choice there. This is the important thing. The identity is not something that happens or you're not, it just occurs. It's what you're choosing. So if you're identified with the substance of what you are, which is life, which is love, which is God, then you'll be expressing that as a reflection. You'll be expressing joy and peace and happiness, lovingness, forgiveness, giving. You'll be expressing all the kind of aspects of care and every thought that it is that represents holiness. So you'll be expressing holiness if you choose that identity. But you can choose, and you can choose just in the same way you can choose the crucifixion or the resurrection. You can choose how you're being. You can choose to be conflictual. You can choose to be afraid. You can choose to be guilty. You can choose to become hateful or vengeful or any form of what represents the separate self, what represents the ego mind or the carnal mind. But it's a choice. So if we have if we are suffering from some kind of grievance, which is usually the case, some kind of grievance, it's because we've chosen to identify not with what we are, but with something else that is really just simply a suggestion of what we are, but has no power, no reality, and above all, no substance, because it isn't coming from God. And so when we choose that way, what we're really doing is we're creating an illusion, and we're creating a sense of guilt that represents a grievance. And therefore we need to forgive. Now, the important thing is to understand exactly what that means. How do we forgive? What is it we're forgiving? Are we forgiving God? No, we haven't got a grievance against God because we understand that we're not separate. Have we got a grievance against our brothers? No, because we understand, again, through the awakening that we're going through this Course of Miracles. I mean, we're not day one students, we're teachers of God or advanced teachers of God, and we understand that what my brother did to me has not occurred. In other words, I was projecting something from myself into form that seemed to give the impression that that it was coming from my brother, but my brother's sinless, my brother's guiltless, and my brother is not the cause of what it is that I appear to be suffering from in the attack. And so my grievance isn't against my brother, but who is it against? Well, there's only me left, so it must be against me. But we don't realize that because the grievance is really against the world, and the world is what it is that we perceive to be in accordance to how we perceive a world of pain and suffering and death and loss and lack and pandemic and all the stuff of this world, which is really it's really our own mind, and so, well, that's the grievance. The grievance is against ourselves. And so therefore we must bring about a forgiveness, a self-forgiveness. Now the key to this is to realize that your forgiveness is the forgiveness of something that is only an illusion and it isn't there, because that's not what we are, and that's not what we've done, and that's not what we really have brought about. So our perception is faulty, and we need to forgive that. And we need to forgive it by recognizing that what we did, not just to our brothers, but to ourselves, has not occurred. So the definition in this case of forgiveness is you're forgiving something that actually never happened, that isn't there. So there isn't anything to forgive. And yet it seems that if we're able to forgive in order to rid ourselves of the grievance, we have to got to forgive something. Yeah, we forgive what it is that we're thinking. We forgive what it is that we believe. We forgive what it is that we think we're seeing. But because it's nothing, and because it's not actually there, there's not a lot we can do about it. And so forgiveness is essentially a non-doing. The moment that we try to forgive, because we don't like the pain of grievance, we don't like the relationship that it brings about with what it is the object of our grievance, whether it be a person, place, or thing. So in order to rectify that problem, to solve that pain, we try to do something loving, or we try to change the relationship, we try to bless or give something that will alleviate that pain and make us feel that we've forgiven. And we haven't. We haven't forgiven at all. We can't forgive if we believe there's something to forgive. That's the paradox. So we have to forgive ourselves for imagining there's something to forgive. And true forgiveness is the realization there's nothing to forgive. So there's no doing in it. Okay? There's no doing in it. There's just a letting go of the grievance. A letting go of the grievance. Jesus put it very strongly in the gospel by saying, if thine eye offends thee, pluck it out, which is a rather classical Aramaic way of saying, get over yourself. There's not a problem. The problem's been solved. So we can't do forgiveness because it's not doable, but we can be forgiven. It's like trust. Trust is not something, if you could try to trust, you can find yourself in in an awful state, attempting to trust, but you can't. It's not a doing, but you can be trusted. And it's the same with, say, acceptance. You can't accept as a thing to do. You can let go of the rejection, of course. That's the letting go of what it is that stands in the way of your acceptance. But the actual acceptance itself is a non-doing. It's simply being. So you being in acceptance. I am being acceptance. I am being trusting. I am being forgiven. So it all comes down to being rather than doing, which is arising out of thinking. When we're thinking and we're doing, we're getting and we're separate. We're separate in our minds from what it is that we really are, because we're not reflecting what it is that we are. We're not expressing what we are. We're expressing something that is not true, something that has no reality, no causation, no substance. The substance is God, and it's the only substance. God is the substance of all form. So when we begin to see that, when we begin to allow ourselves to recognize that the only thing that was necessary in the forgiveness process was the letting go of the grievance, and there was nothing to add to that, there was nothing to do, then we start to relax a little bit and allow what it is that's taking place without having to discern the way it should be or what it should be. In other words, we let go of our judgments. And we're being in acceptance and being in forgiveness and being in trust. We're being in a different level of consciousness altogether. To that level of consciousness exists when we're identified with the carnal ego mind, with the humanness, because we're moving from humanness to beingness. And that's a different thing altogether. And when I'm being real. And if I'm washing my car, I'm washing my car. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do when I finish washing my car. I'm just simply washing my car. And I'm being in that. So that beingness is your right mind. And you come into that right mind, what you're actually doing is you're saying, I accept the atonement. I'm at one with myself, which is everything. There isn't something separate from me that I need to repair or fix or improve or get. I just need to actually allow myself to be free of judgment and discerning what something means to me for good or bad by allowing it to be there in acceptance. And that my acceptance then becomes an ongoing forgiveness. In other words, it becomes the functionality of forgiveness rather than the act of forgiveness. It's not an act. It's real. It's real because it's what it is that you are. It's a true reflection of your reality. So if we're accepting the atonement and we're being what it is a true reflection of ourselves as God created us, then things start to change. The perception changes. The view seems to change. We see things differently. Our eyes are open because we're not looking through the physical eye anymore. When you're in beingness, you're seeing through the heart. You're seeing through the heart, and that means that you're seeing things without judgment and without need or without want. You're seeing things just the way they are, and they don't need to change. They don't need to improve. And there's nothing to get. And so there's innocence. That's what innocence is. It's just simply allowing everything to be the way it is. And then we can see our brother the way he really is. We go beyond the seeming obstacles that arise out of his sense of separation. We look past that because it's not important. It's not that we don't see it, but we don't think it's important anymore because we're looking at what it is through our heart in form, and we're seeing beyond the appearance to what it is that we really want to see. What we want to see is what it is that we don't need to change, that we don't need to improve. That is what is real. So we're seeing the real. The veil is being lifted. We're like a bride that has come to the altar, and the veil is taken away to reveal the beauty that we really are, that was concealed because of our blindness. We begin to see the real world shining in innocence. We're no longer imposing the personal will on the view, but we're seeing the view through the eyes of Christ. And we're delighted by what we see because it fills the heart. It's not a problem. The very first thing that hits you so hard, so beautifully hard, is that there are no problems. This is what we just read. It's wonderful to acknowledge that is a tremendous gift. But to see it, to realize it, to know it, to actually perceive it, there are no problems. And everything just carries on in the same way. It's not some magical sort of thing occurs and things look different from the point of view of the senses. They all appear to be exactly as they were before. And everything that needed doing still needs doing. But it's different. It's different because it's not a problem. It's perfect. That's the kingdom of heaven. And that is there available to us. It's available to us for the very simple reason that we are actually in heaven right now. That's not the experience, but it isn't an experience. It's a fact. Okay? And that fact can be acknowledged in how we reflect the belief in it. We reflect the belief in it by being in what it is that I've just described. And that's our liberation from pain and suffering and death. So thank you for listening. God bless you.